Blake, it's always good to be back talking with you. I feel like I start out every episode the exact same way, so I'll come up with a new intro.
Got our intro.
Exciting time. I think we mentioned on some previous episodes that my brother has been, he has a working studio in Birmingham where we live, and it's kind of a multimedia space. Does a lot of screen printing, videography, photography, live events, the whole shebang. And the building that they have, which I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, is maybe like 2,400 square feet, whatever the space is. Zach's actually in the next room working right now while we're recording this episode. They've just outgrown it. And so they started searching around and told me that they've really been started looking about a year ago. Just kind of looking around, keeping their eyes open for any new properties that might fit the bill as far as what they need in a facility. Kind of an independent, standalone building because they do a lot of like music-related things, and obviously you don't want to be in like a shopping center where you're taking off your neighbors and stuff. And so that's where you come in. At some point, it finally clicked in my head, and I'm like, well, have we even thought about reaching out to Blake, man? Let's talk to him and see what he thinks. And so I know you and Zach have met a couple of times and maybe even gone and looked at a few places. But yeah, that's pretty cool. And I'd like to kind of, not having been there, I know it'd be great to get Zach on, my brother, to kind of talk about the business and what all they do. I'm paraphrasing because they have a lot going on. But moral of the story, they need a new space. And you're kind of encouraging us to go in the direction of maybe buying versus just leasing another building. So yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah.
What all have y'all been up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really just happened this week. So I think it'll be fun to follow this journey as we go through the progress of that. But really, it's broken down to what are the goals, right? So we need more space, and then what for? So got a music venue, got a print shop, recording studio, and some of those things can't happen at the same time. And so looking at a space that could fit that bill from a layout and size standpoint, and then also location and price, right? So can we find something that fits that? On market, so far the answer has been no. And so that's where I think we kind of come in and say, okay, how can we find some stuff off market, which is a lot of how the commercial space works. So
tell me about that.
So as it's probably why we didn't really talk about this before, because my day to day as a realtor is in the residential world.
Side, yeah.
The commercial world's a very, very different world. Like, it's got its own designations, its own brokerages. It's apples and oranges, almost, if you will. But I don't spend every single day in it like a lot of commercial brokers do. And so there's some value that they could add that I can't. But I understand how to talk the language. I understand how the industry works in the commercial side, because I've bought and I own some commercial property, and I do probably 2 to 3 commercial deals a year. Right. So again, not in it every single day. Far more than
we do. So yeah.
So if we can't find anything on market, then how can we find something off market? One, it's calling all the commercial brokers I do know and saying, hey, what do you know? What clients do you have that own property that fit this bill? Because that's a lot of what it is in the commercial world, the emotions are pretty much gone, and it's more about the numbers. And so as an investor,
good way to put it. I never thought about it like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So as an investor, everything I own is for sale for the right price, right? And so if I go to these commercial brokers and say, hey, I'm looking for this many square footage, this part of town, this kind of layout, this type of building, what do you have? He goes, oh, I've got 2 or 3 clients with properties like that in the area you're looking for. Let me call them. And then it's, hey, would you consider an offer? Yes? Okay, that's all I need to know. And he comes back to me, yeah, they'd be interested in selling, bring me something. And then it's on us to do some homework to say, here's what we think the value is based off the information you've given us. And that's how a lot of those deals are worked out. Especially, just kind of a side note, but multifamily and commercial world, if there's a tenant in that building already, the owner doesn't want to advertise that it's for sale, because that could mess up the tenant in some form or fashion, right? Okay, yeah. And so a lot of times it's quote unquote advertised, but not advertised, just kind of word of mouth and inside the brokerage world.
inside that world.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that we're doing. And then another thing is finding stuff that either is unrepresented or is not for sale, just knocking on some doors, right? And making phone calls, or finding some land that says, hey, this land is the size and location we want. Could we build it? Mm-hmm. And that's something that we've talked about as well. So a lot of different opportunities, and opened up his mind from, here's our budget. We're just going to lease a space. We've got X amount of dollars per month to rent it, to saying, well, what if you had that same amount of money working for you towards a mortgage?
A mortgage, yeah.
Because, again, long term, we've talked about 20 years from now, pay it off. Not only do you have a successful business that you're running or that you've sold, but you also have this building that could be worth, 7 figures.
Sure. So. Well, that's something, that we've been discussing with you, and you've been encouraging us to kind of pursue some kind of investment. That's something I want to do, and I just didn't really have a direction. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, do I want to be a landlord over a multi-family apartment complex, or do I want to get into the, maybe flipping some houses, or what do I want to do in what direction? And that's a question I've never really been able to answer.
Yeah.
But I know I want to invest in something. And so Zach, in his talks with you, he's called me a couple of times and be like, yeah, Blake's pushing me to, I think purchasing is the right idea. Would you want to go in with me on a deal?
Yeah.
Whether or not his business partner, who's also a part of this endeavor, joins us or not, I know me and Zach are all in. We want to do something, and this may be a cool avenue to pursue. It's like, well, let's get into the commercial real estate. Like you said, buy a building, grow your business. Probably one day I'll be working for my brother, so I can see myself being kind of part of that. Like I said, business for him is just ramped up, so I'm usually spending, at least one day a week over here helping him anyways. So, maybe down the road, once we can expand, that may be a new career path for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's exciting. You mentioned knocking on the doors. Zach kind of called. Blake said, if I see a property I like, just go in the front door and ask if it's for sale, and who do I need to talk to? And, not being in this world or knowing the language or the lingo or how things work, we just thought that was comical.
Yeah.
It's just like, what? And then also kind of learning, what can we do? Where is that limit? Maybe we can really pull this off, or maybe we need to be a little more grounded in what our expectations are and stuff. And so it's kind of cool to finally have a direction to kind of move forward in, and a purpose, having a working business that we're trying to relocate to a bigger space versus just like, all right, I'm going to go buy a warehouse building in a good location, but what am I going to do with it?
Right.
Now what?
Yeah.
So
we've talked about how to get started in real estate, but the first place to start is
what's the plan, the goal,
Yeah, figure out what you want, but with the bank, right? So you got to know what you can afford. Mm-hmm. And so that's the homework that you and your brother have, is going to a bank. And I gave him a good banker contact to call, but just say, based off this business, what type of loan could we be approved for? Mm-hmm. And not letting that be kind of a guideline, but not a bottleneck, in the sense of, if the business can support more from a cash flow standpoint, more than you're approved for, you can go to the private sector. So like, let's say I'm a hard money lender that invests in companies, right? Y'all are approved. You need $1 million. You're approved for $600,000, and the business, from a valuation standpoint and all the money that it produces, justifies $1.5 million, right? Then, as an investor, I may come in, see opportunity, and say, hey, you need to cover a gap of $400,000. Structured the correct way, I'm interested in being that gap funding for you, right? And so it all comes down to really the valuation of the business, how stable it is, the cash flow, and the potential profit of what it can do going forward, that will take the risk off of that lender or the bank.
Yeah.
So the bank doesn't want risk, so they're going to lend.
Well, I don't want risk either.
Right? Yeah. But taking risk gives you potential reward.
Yeah.
And so that's just something that we'll go through as we look at property and talk about numbers on how to value that, of saying, all right, what's worst case? Let's say you've got a super down 6 months of all the things that y'all do here. are you still going to be able to cover the mortgage note? Are you still going to be able to do X, Y, and Z? And so, and then if the answer is no, you can say, well, what's your risk tolerance for that no?
Right.
So it's just going through that exercise. It's the same thing we do as an investor. If I go buy a rental house, what's my risk tolerance to still be able to pay that monthly mortgage if it's vacant for 4 months?
Yeah.
And that's where diversification with either different businesses or multiple properties helps dilute that. And so like right now, we've got 40-something units. We've got maybe 5 or 6 that are offline at any given time or vacant at any given time, and we're quote-unquote losing money on, but the portfolio as a whole is still positive.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's that concept is, if the recording studio is not bringing in any money because that business dropped, can the screen printing business float that and cover that gap? Or can if that's down, and so I like the diversification that y'all are running in this space because it gives you that same concept of different pillars of income, which helps diversify your risk.
If for anyone listening is familiar with, we're kind of in the Avondale neighborhood of downtown Birmingham here in Alabama. I know property value in this particular area has really grown over the past decade. A lot of investment in this area, especially in kind of the hub downtown next to like Avondale Brewery and all that stuff, which we're right up the street from. That was one of my biggest, when they first started talking about, hey, we were kind of outgrowing the space. We want to buy the building from the owner, but the owner's like, no, I'm sitting on a golden egg. I'm golden goose. I'm not selling the building. So that's kind of out the window. And then they started coming to the realization that like we've just simply outgrown the space. We've got to move. If we want the business to grow, then we've got to get into a bigger place. And I was just like, man, that's just such a bummer. You guys are in such a good location, and especially for me because I just live right down the street. So it's easy for me to pop over. But yeah, just values in this area, and I think Zach said that you guys looked at a place that's also kind of in Avondale, more in Crestwood, I guess, is right on that line. But it was a pretty dilapidated building. But I was still surprised at the price they're asking for that place, and I'm like, whoa, man, that is just wild. I guess that's just kind of what I expect to hear, at least in this area, for what buildings might be. And so trying to broaden our horizons, like, okay, let's look at some other places too, in case, maybe Irondale would be a better fit, or maybe we could get more bang for our buck there. And so, yeah, I don't know, just trying to, it's very intimidating, especially with us just kind of find some of the websites and stuff that we found, they're escaping me now, but just like, kind of like the Trulia of the commercial world. There's a few sites out there. Yeah. And Crexy is one. But, man, it was a little discouraging, just looking around.
Yeah.
And I think another building that we were kind of interested in, maybe explain this to me a little bit. You said it was, or Zach texted me and said, no, this building's probably no-go because it's under litigation right now. And I'm like, well, what the heck does that mean? And is that a common thing?
It's hard to say if it's common or not. Probably not, but I mean, there's a lawsuit over it in some form or fashion. It could be like a divorce situation and the owner is tied up in that, or it could be a business owner suing another business owner for whatever reason. I mean, there's tons of reasons it could be under litigation, but the fact that it is under litigation means it can't sell.
Can't sell, yeah. Okay.
And so what we talked about was kind of backing into an area based off of budget. And that budget, one, is a direction from the bank, but it's also a direction of what can the business support conservatively. And then that'll give us, a realistic view of where we need to be looking. Because if the budget is half of what Avondale sells for, it's not really realistic to continue to look around here because it's probably just spinning our wheels. But if it does reflect that, then it's okay, let's hit the ground, knock on some doors, and really do what we need to do to find that property and get into it.
Yeah. So, well, it's an exciting time, and
it is.
I'm trying to be positive and stuff. And
well, it's tough when you go on. This is a little different commercial to residential, to where, like I said, there's a lot of off-market deals that happen in the commercial world. I heard once someone say LoopNet is where listings go to die. It's because because if it makes it all the way to LoopNet, that means
there's a lot of red flags, maybe.
all the off-market people passed on it. All the the brokerage is sending it out to their A-list buyers and investors first before it gets listed. They've all passed on it. And so then it finally goes up on LoopNet. So if it gets there, then it's probably not a great deal. But on the flip side of that, things are, it's still a crazy seller's market right now. So if something's been up for a year, 2 years on LoopNet, maybe that seller's kind of worn down. Where the first year he said, no, I'm not taking less than X. Well, after 100 offers at Y, you come in and maybe offer Z, and now he's more flexible because he's just sat on it for so long.
Right.
And that's when, like I said, there's zero emotion. It's all about the numbers, but there is some emotion that plays into it when it's not a corporation or an entity owned. It's a quote unquote mom and pop owned. There's some emotion that plays into the value of that property based off that owner's time.
Yeah.
And if they were interested in selling 2 years ago and they've spent 24 months of time continuing to update or maintain the property or deal with tenants, the value of that property could be diminished. And so we've kind of got two ends of the spectrum of let's go after stuff that's off market, or let's go start calling on things that have been on market for a long time and see if they're worn down yet and see if they're willing to take a lesser price.
Yeah. So homework for us, and I speak myself. This is really my brother and his business partner, but me and my brother are like this. So I'm pretty much I'm roping myself into this.
You're the spokesman.
Yeah, I'm the spokesman. But I want to go in with them and invest and do my part to help them succeed. Because like I said, I could see myself being a part of this just as much as Zach is, which would be the dream. It'd be awesome.
Yeah.
This is a fun place to work. It beats my regular 9 to 5. So. And then not only that, but, like you said, investing in our first property, and even if the business moves on to bigger and better things, still having that property in our portfolio that we could then lease out or do anything else with. So I'm excited. So it sounds like we need to kind of get a better understanding of where our budget truly is so that we can decide where to look and not waste our time looking in areas that aren't going to be very beneficial. Anything else that we could be doing?
So starting with the budget is number one, but also one thing we talked about was if we found space, because he mentioned he had looked at before y'all engaged me a space 10,000 plus square feet, which is more than he indicated he needs, or if there's a space that we develop, building out to where you can sublet or lease additional space to just another business and subsidize some of that income. If he needs 8,000 square feet and we find a place that's 12,000 and 4,000 it to TurboTax or whoever, right? Then that can offset your basically debt to income. Yeah. And so that may be another play we look at as we go into this. Just
creative ways to maybe make a space work.
Yeah. And again, what that does is diversify your risk, because if this business is down, well, you're still floated by someone else's business coming in.
Sure. So. Sounds awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah.
I just hope we can make the deal work. And I know these things don't usually happen quickly. So excited going forward and kind of finally beginning our journey. And I think it'd be really awesome. Hopefully next episode or soon we can get my brother on. I don't think he's been on this podcast yet.
Yeah, it'd be fun to have him on.
To kind of talk about, for anyone out there listening, kind of what he does and really interesting. You bring guests in here all the time. This has kind of been our main place for recording. Yeah. And the most common question we get is like, what do you guys do here? And it's like, well, how much time do you have? Yeah. So they're definitely diversified, and it's been really cool to see them grow over the past 3 years, but excited for the future. So awesome, man. Well, great catching up. And until next time, man.
See you next time.